Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast from London. I'm Ollie Barrett and these are the headlines. Russian troops push forward in the Donetsk region of Ukraine, aiming to take over the entire Donbass after taking Lugansk. Pope Francis says he hopes to be able to go to Moscow and Kiev as soon as possible after a visit to Canada later this month. Britain will host a conference next year focused on helping Ukraine recover from the damage caused by Russia's invasion, as nations gather in Switzerland for this year's version. Inflation in Turkey for June soared to the highest level in 24 years at 78.6%. Heavy rains in Sydney force thousands to flee dangerous floods as the city's largest dam spills a torrent of water. We will start in Denmark, where 3 people have been killed and several others wounded in a shooting in Copenhagen. Police have arrested a suspect, a 22-year-old Danish man, and charged him with manslaughter. The shooting took place at a shopping centre in the capital on Sunday. The suspect was carrying a rifle and ammunition. Police say they're searching for any accomplices, but say the suspect has a history of mental health issues, and they've now ruled out the possibility of the attack being terror-related.
Der er ikke noget i vores efterforskning, eller de dokumenter, vi har gennemgået, eller de ting, vi har fundet, eller de vidnesberetninger, vi har fundet, der kan underbygge, at der er tale om en terrorhandling. Vores vurdering her nu, det er, at det er tilfældige ofre, og ikke, at det ikke drejer sig om hverken køn, eller på anden måde motiveret i noget, der kunne minde om det.
Denmark's Prime Minister is urging Danish citizens to stand together and support each other. It comes as the country was wrapping up hosting the first 3 stages of the Tour de France cycle race. A Harry Styles concert in Copenhagen on Sunday night was cancelled after the attack. The singer said he was heartbroken along with the people of Copenhagen. Troubles continue to mount for UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson. He's now under pressure to reveal whether he knew about sexual misconduct allegations aimed at the former Tory Deputy Whip Chris Pincher. The Labour Party's Annalise Dodds has now written to the Prime Minister asking for details on what he knew and when. Last week, Chris Pincher stepped down as the Conservative Party's Deputy Whip after accusations that he groped 2 men at a club. He was later expelled from the Conservative Party. Chris Pincher faces 6 new claims now of inappropriate behaviour, stretching back several years. He denies them. Let's go now to my colleague Chris Jones, our London correspondent. Chris, what is the government saying about what Boris Johnson knew and when about some of these allegations about Chris Pincher's conduct?
Yeah, well, firstly, Ollie, this is just another example of a scandal that is really piling the pressure on the Conservative government, but also onto Boris Johnson's leadership right now. If we go back to exactly what's transpired over the past week or so, Deputy Chief Whip Chris Pincher was alleged to have groped two men at a private members club in central London. Those allegations were brought against him, and he soon put in that resignation letter, which he wrote that he had embarrassed himself and embarrassed others and had drank far too much. Now, as you say, this isn't the first time that allegations of this sort have been brought up against Mr. Pincher. In fact, in 2017, he resigned from his post for a similar reason. Now, there are real questions being brought against Prime Minister Boris Johnson now as to what he knew about these previous allegations, as you say, stretching back several years. He denies knowing of any specific allegations that have been brought against Mr. Pincher in the past, but others have refuted that. For example, Dominic Cummings, who is the former number 10 strategic advisor to number 10, he said that Mr. Johnson did know of these allegations, and in fact he said that Johnson had referred to Chris Pincher as Pincher by name, Pincher by nature, before he appointed Mr. Pincher as Deputy Chief Whip earlier this year in February. It has to be said that number 10 has refuted this claim from Dominic Cummings, but there are many that simply just don't believe Boris Johnson's current version of events. One of those is Jenny Chapman, who is the Shadow Minister of State at the Cabinet Office for the opposition Labour Party, and she says that there are many of those within Westminster that simply just don't believe that Boris Johnson did not know about these allegations. She wants answers, the opposition Labour Party wants answers, and most of all the public want answers over this, and it really does amplify that mistrust that is being brought against Boris Johnson at the moment. Remember, it's not too long ago that the Conservative Party brought up a vote of confidence against the Prime Minister, a vote that he barely won, and that really does amplify that there isn't just mistrust from opposition political parties, but there is opposition from within his own party itself. So there is a lot of pressure on Boris Johnson right now, and a lot of questions that really need to be answered over this Chris Pincher situation, and what is going to be done about the situation remains to be really seen. We have seen Chris Pincher removed from the Conservative Party. He's now an independent MP, but one thing is for sure, Boris Johnson certainly facing a lot of pressure on his leadership right now.
Chris, thank you. Chris Jones in London. And we'll stay in the UK, and some lawyers here have entered the second week of strike action. The criminal barristers are protesting over a long-running dispute about pay and working conditions. They're demanding a 25% rise in pay for legal aid work. The Criminal Bar Association has rejected a 15% rise in fees. It says junior lawyers can sometimes make less than the hourly minimum wage, and it claims the 15% offer wouldn't kick in immediately or even apply to backlogged cases. The strikes led to further disruptions in courts in England and Wales. The Criminal Bar Association says that more than 200 trials were postponed at the last minute between January and March due to a shortage of lawyers in the UK. Ministers say that because of government initiatives, the number of backlogged cases is coming down, and they claim that the strikes will lead to more delays and more people waiting for justice. Meanwhile, solicitors in the criminal justice system say they are facing similar problems as well. The president of the Criminal Courts Solicitors Association, Hashim Puri, says he believes that years of underfunding have led to a crisis in the criminal justice system, and that large numbers of criminal solicitors are leaving the profession because of low pay.
And it's only going to get worse, and that's not attributable to COVID. It's attributable to the slash in funds. It's attributable to the lack of people wanting to do this job anymore. And it's a great profession. I do love my job, but it's not sustainable.
Ukraine's military has confirmed its withdrawal from the city of Lysychansk. The development comes after Russia's defense minister said that Russian troops are in full control of Lugansk. Ukraine's defense officials say they were outnumbered in the eastern battlefront.
There was a risk of encirclement around Lysychansk. The units which were there could continue to hold the territories for 1, 2 or 3 weeks longer, but the question was the price of this action. We would rather suffer by ourselves because of range shelling by artillery, rockets, aviation strikes, than defeat. So the guys would lose their lives for nothing. It could be a second Mariupol, a mini Mariupol. That's why there was a decision finally to withdraw the forces.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says his forces will return to Lysychansk.
If the command of our army withdraws people from certain points of the front where the enemy has greater fire superiority, in particular this applies to Lysychansk, it means only one thing. We will return, thanks to our tactics, thanks to the increase in the supply of modern weapons. Ukraine does not give anything up. And when someone over there in Moscow reports something about the Luhansk region, let them remember their reports and promises before February 24, in the first days of this invasion, in the spring and now. Let them really evaluate what they got over this time and how much they paid for it, because their current reports will turn into dust just as the previous ones. We are gradually moving forward in the Kharkiv region, in the Kherson region and at sea. Snake Island is a good example of this. There will be a day when we will say the same about Donbass.
Meanwhile, towards the south, the city of Kramatorsk was hit for the second day in a row by Russian rockets. Kramatorsk is the administrative centre of Ukraine's eastern Donbass region. The mayor of the city says the strikes hit a residential area and an unoccupied hotel, and no casualties were reported. Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin's ally, the president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, claimed that Ukraine over the weekend tried to attack Belarus with missiles but failed.
I must report to you, 3 days ago, maybe a little more, from the territory of Ukraine, they tried to strike at military facilities in the territory of Belarus. But thank God, the Pantsir anti-aircraft systems managed to intercept all the missiles fired by the armed forces of Ukraine.
Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has visited Ukraine on Sunday.
Australia will today announce an additional $100 million of military support, bringing our total spending to almost $390 million. We will provide an additional 14 armoured personnel carriers, an additional 20 Bushmasters, the protected mobility vehicles that we have provided, taking that number up to 60. We'll provide additional other military equipment, including drones and other equipment that has been requested by Ukraine.
The Olympic chief Thomas Bach also visited Kiev on Sunday, where he met with Volodymyr Zelensky. He says the IOC will ensure that Ukrainian athletes can compete at the 2024 Games in Paris, despite the Russian invasion.
Are supporting them, and we are supporting them in a way that we can then see at the Olympic Games Paris 2024 and at the Olympic Winter Games 26 in Milano Cortina a strong and a proud and successful team of the NOC of Ukraine, and that there the Ukrainian flag will fly high.
A team of Ukrainian sumo wrestlers, meanwhile, is training in Japan for the upcoming World Games. They had to shift bases after practice was halted by the Russian invasion.
The 6-strong Ukrainian amateur sumo team are set to fly to the United States state of Alabama on July 5th. They are scheduled to compete in the World Games, which is an Olympic-like event featuring sports that are not contested at the Summer Games. The team had just finished a training session at their base in the city of Kharkiv when Russia invaded in late February and the city came under bombardment.
It is very painful for us to watch the situation in Ukraine. We hope that it will all be over soon and we can return home to peaceful skies above our heads.
Soon after, an acquaintance enabled them to hold a training camp in Japan. The Ukrainian team arrived in Japan in late May and held training camps in southern Oita and Ehime prefectures. The team is now well prepared and raring to go once the games begin on July 7th in Birmingham.
As for the World Games, I really want to win and show support for our troops, to raise our Ukrainian flag and have our anthem played to the glory of our country, to show support in this way.
Ivana Berezovska won a silver medal in the open weight category at the 2017 World Games. She is one of 2 women in the 6-person team. She feels that by competing at the World Games, she will be able to give herself something to be happy about, adding that she hopes to give the people of Ukraine something to cheer about as well.
I hope to win. I will strive for it. First of all, I want to give myself, my country and my family something to be happy about. I hope we will win and make it to the highest step of the podium and be proud of ourselves and most of all be proud of our country.
Professional sumo is confined to Japan, but the ancient sport is popular at the amateur level around the world. There are around 3,000 people involved in sumo in Ukraine. Interestingly, the country has also seen major success since the sport made its debut at the World Games in 2005. The World Games have been held every 4 years since 1981 and feature a range of non-Olympic sports such as billiards. This year's event is being held after a delay of 1 year because of the coronavirus pandemic. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
The British Army has fallen victim to a major hacking incident over the weekend. YouTube and Twitter accounts were targeted to promote cryptocurrency and NFTs. The hacking lasted for a short period of time and the Army soon regained control of its various handles. Authorities have ordered a full investigation into what happened. During the time the accounts were compromised, hackers swapped out the organisation's profile picture, bio and cover photo on Twitter to promote crypto and also sent out various retweets about NFTs. No organisation has so far claimed responsibility for the cyber attack, but it does come just days after Norway witnessed a similar incident with an attack targeting a string of Norwegian public service websites. Hotel chains in Europe are hiring employees regardless of work experience or resume as hoteliers face a shortage of employees. Restaurants and bars are also facing a lack of waiters and staff.
There's a waiters' crisis because of all we have been talking about, salaries and long hours. But I think this is a structural crisis of the economy and work in Spain, not just in the hospitality sector. And if we keep on lacking waiters, what will happen in the future is that there will be no bars.
According to the CEO of Accor, Europe's largest hotel chain, hotels are interviewing people without a resume and recruiting them within a day. He says new recruits are being given just 6 hours of training and then they learn on the job. The hotel chain operates multiple brands in over 110 countries and is running short of 35,000 workers globally. Spain and Portugal are two interesting examples. They are two top tourist destinations and under particular stress because tourism accounts for up to 15% of their economic output. Restaurant owners there are struggling to keep up with demand with the limited amount of resources and a lack of experienced workers. Some bars are able to open only when students are in need of extra cash and available to work.
We would like to extend the opening hours, but we have a limited amount of resources. For instance, we are not opening the restaurant during the week because we don't have workers. Our people during the week are studying. If they study, they can't work. And if they can't work, we cannot open.
Portugal, meanwhile, is expected to raise salaries in the hospitality sector by 7%. Carlos Sainz Jr. won his maiden Formula One Grand Prix on his 150th start. There was a collective sigh of relief as the Chinese driver Zhou Guanyu emerged unscathed from a major accident. Sainz had taken pole in the wet on Saturday, but it was world champion Max Verstappen who took the lead into the first corner. A massive pile-up at the back saw the race red flagged almost immediately, and replays later showed the extent of the crash. Pictures of it in detail were released only after it was confirmed that the first Chinese driver in F1 was safe, and he said that the halo protection device saved his life. Sainz took the checkered flag ahead of Perez and Lewis Hamilton, with Leclerc in fourth and Verstappen holding off Mick Schumacher for seventh. He leads Perez by 34 points, with Leclerc 43 behind in the Drivers' Championship.
"150 races later with Ferrari in Silverstone. I cannot ask for more. It's a very special day, a day that I will never forget, a very special weekend in general. And thank you everyone for the support, for the cheers. Lewis was on it today, I heard. It was one of his days, but we managed to hold on, and I'm incredibly happy."
There was a special occasion at Wimbledon on Sunday to mark the centenary of Centre Court, a parade of singles champions from Angela Mortimer to Billie Jean King. The biggest cheers were reserved for a man who turned up unexpectedly, Roger Federer.
Give it up for Angela Mortimer.
Jan Kodesh. Conchita Martinez.
Martina Hingis. Stefan Edberg.
Rafael Nadal.
Petra Kvitova.
Andy Murray.
Margaret Court.
John Newcomb.
Chris Everett. Rod the Rocket Laver. Bjorn Borg.
And Venus Williams.
Billie Jean King.
And ladies and gentlemen, Novak Djokovic. Eight-time champion.
His name is Roger Federer.
I knew I belonged here.
This court has been truly special for my childhood.
I hope I did that, and I hope I can come back, like you said, one more time.
Well, I'll also be back tomorrow at the same time. Do stay tuned to WION. In the meantime, World is One.
This is right, Arab.